All right, guys. Weekly live is afoot every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. We're going live to answer your questions ahead of our upcoming YouTube release. Right now, we're just waiting on old TikTok to be all set up. TikTok's looking good, so we're live. Tomorrow, we're going to be posting the video we have about fitting 35s on your third generation Tundra. So we cycled the suspension travel, steered it, or cycled it through all the suspensions to travel, steered it all the way, and wanted to see what hit. And with the 17 by 8.5 plus 25 wheels, nothing hit. So realistically, you could run those with the stock suspension. So we're here to answer all your questions that are about fitting tires that are bigger than stock on whatever rig you got going on. So how big can I get on my stock 2025 iForce Max TRD off-road? A 315 77 or a 35 by 12.5 will essentially fit at stock height with a 8.5-inch wide wheel with a plus 25 offset or something around that size. At most, you will need to trim the liners on the rear. If you're going to keep your stock wheels, you're going to need you might need a little bit of a wheel spacer. Without a wheel spacer, we think you might be able to clear an 11.5. And that's not lift height dependent. Doesn't matter. Now, in our testing, we wanted to see if 37s will, how far away 37s would be. We didn't have 37s, but we kind of, could check with the 35s and measure. And ultimately, you would need to limit bump travel by about an inch. And then you might need to trim the inner lip on the fender flare, a little bit of a viber cut, and you might need to do a cab mount chop. But a lot easier to clear 37s than it has been previously. You guys had a Gen 6 Ranger. Yeah, we had a customer come in who wanted to put some Dobinson IMS on their 6th Gen Ranger. So we ran it through their paces, installed it, and they were very, very, very good for the level it was. Any special discount codes for the live viewers? That's a good question. Something we'll probably have to figure out. So stay tuned until next week. We might have a discount code for you guys. But going back to the Ranger, we had the IMS on it. We tested it. They did great. We didn't test tire clearance. It had the stock tires on it. The customer wasn't going to change the tires at the same time as the lift. And they worked really, really well. They were about as comfortable on the street as stock, but a lot more composed. Handling was better. It was really good off-road, and articulation was pretty good. Definitely gained some travel. Since then, there's been a lot more options that have come out. I think Ibach has kits, and other brands are making some stuff. I do know Bilstein has 6112s and 6100 rear shocks that they're working on. Will you be able to road test Ibach Stage 2R? We can if everybody really wants to. After driving the 6th generation Ranger, it is the same as the 5th generation. So we can review them. I can almost guarantee it's going to be the same as our 5th generation review because the parts are almost identical. I'm thinking about doing a 6100 setup on my 3rd gen with a 0 offset rim and 295. 0 offsets are gonna rub on these 3rd generation Tundras. A 0 offset's just gonna rub on the fender, so you're gonna have to trim. Going to a plus 25 would mean you could run an even bigger tire. So depends on what you want to prioritize, looking cool for the dudes who don't care or having more traction and clearance. But ultimately, you're going to probably be into the front bumper a little bit, and you're probably going to have to trim some of the fender flare out like you would if you were going to clear 37s. So I'd be a little bit more conservative on wheel specs, and you'll get more tire under it. TikTok got anything to say?
No questions yet, but if you guys have any on TikTok, let us know, and we'll get them answered for you.
Do you guys have an email or phone number we can call to get this information on paper? Yep. So you can email us at support@shocksurplus.com, or if you go on our website, you can live chat us, hit our contact page, fill out a form. You can also call us at 213-433-3616. We're open Monday through Friday for customer service stuff from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific, Monday through Thursday, and on Fridays, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. What would you recommend for a 2020 Land Cruiser for a suspension? Kind of depends on how you're using it and your goals. For specific recommendations like those, give the team a shout at those contacts I just gave you. They'll be able to get you dialed in. I thought the Pro 2R and the Ranger was a little stiff on my stock Ranger. Honestly, we found them to be pretty soft, but the one thing that I will say about Eibach is that one, they probably optimized it around a bigger tire than stock, which makes a really big difference. But two, they do let you lift them a little tall, so make sure you're not at like the last 3/4 to an inch of their recommended adjustment range, because that'll make a big difference. Went to buy the 6112 and 6100 for Tundra. Couldn't find 1.25" springs on our site. They should be up there, but reach out to the team directly, and if there's something going on with the listing, we can still get you set up. Ranger, I do understand the differences between them. Functionally, travel is actually the same on all the aftermarket coilovers. Weight's about the same. Spring rates are about the same. Yes, they're wider, but the wider track is more mounting points and offsets than it is actually longer arms. The arms aren't actually any longer on the regular Rangers. They are on the Ranger Raptor. Shock mounting position is pretty much the same. Watch the Gen 5 review is going to tell you everything you need to know about the Gen 6 parts. I can guarantee you that. I've driven both. We've had both in. I can tell you they stock for stock feel exactly the same, and IMS on both feel exactly the same. Oh, yeah. Aaron Applegate, our number is 213-433-3616. What are the best shocks in your opinion for 2020 Silverado? There's a lot of different Silverados. Could be a Trail Boss, could be a 1500, could be a 2500, could be a 3500. So that's kind of it depends. But for these specific recommendations, hit us up directly. The sales team will be able to help you out with that. If we're talking half ton, some of our favorite options in the middle of the road are 6112s and the iBox. You're spending more money. Fox 2.5, King 2.5s are great. Icon makes a lot of good options in the middle and a lot of good options if you have load to worry about, but also not something high performing. Can this Q&A be a weekly thing, or is it only when new videos drop? Every Wednesday at 3 p.m. we're going to try to do one. Not going to guarantee there might be something that comes up that won't allow me, but I'm going to do it every time we get the chance. Is Icon the best setup for Gen 3 Tundra for best ride quality and light off-road? Honestly, so far, the Icon 2.5 EXPs were the most comfortable thing we've tested so far. Jury's out on all the other options, but they're definitely more plush than the Bilsteins and the iBox. ZR2 on BFG 34.5 all stock fine tire wear that's not due to alignment. Would a perch kit or diesel springs be a close solution for strange tire wear? What's probably happening with that strange tire wear, if it's like cupping or feathering, one of two things will be happening. One, the unsprung mass of that wheel and tire package is too great for the way the spring rate and the way the stock shocks are damped. I wouldn't be surprised because the Multimatics have a pretty small piston. Additionally, GM trucks really have some pretty sloppy control arms and pretty soft bushings. So what that could be is the additional load, the additional, mass and leverage of that larger tire could be causing deflection of the joints. So what's happening is you could be aligned within perfect specs right now, but as you're going down the road, things are moving around. You could be having an active alignment. So, it's hard to test how that is. I would have to see the tire specifically to see what's going on. But if it's chewing up every other lug, it's probably a lack of damping force at the Multimatics. The unsprung mass is too much. You need to upgrade to a 2.5 or 3.0 coilover and shock packages. Or if it's like kind of like it's toe wear or really bad caster wear, or really bad camber wear, I'm sorry, that could be the active alignment thing I'm talking about. 315 70 17 on method 17 by 8.5 plus 35 on the Tundra work well. I think honestly, yeah, the plus 35 should still work well. We had a lot of inboard clearance, like a lot of inboard clearance. So you might even have more usable clearance because of the lower scrub of the plus 35. What's up, TikTok?
Andrew wants to know, he says, daily driving and occasional off-road on the weekend, 21 Tacoma. I want to do 3-inch on 33s. This is my first lift kit.
Well, so 3 inches isn't going to be possible on a 3rd gen Tacoma. And we will answer this question on every single live every single week because there's always going to be somebody that asks it. 2 inches is as much as you should do. The 3rd gen sit on the same architecture in the front and in the rear, but the more important thing is the front here, as the 2nd gens 05 to 15, but they sit an inch higher from the factory. On the 05 to 15 trucks, 3 to 3.5 inches was the most lift you could do before you do a drop bracket lift kit, which is the worst thing you could ever do. So doing a 3-inch on that platform is like doing a 4-inch from what it was designed for. Nothing's going to work. There's not a coilover that can adjust that high. If you run spacers, by the time you've dropped the diff far enough to make it work, you've lost all the clearance you've gained. Additionally, the taller you go up, the less positive caster you can run. If you're going to rub on anything, it's going to be up front when you steer, and it's going to be behind those front tires. The more positive caster you can run, the further you can push those front tires forward, the more tire clearance you're going to have. And if you got to trim anything, it's going to be a viper cut, and that gets worse after. You have things probably get worse after the 1.5, 2-inch lift mark. So settle your expectations, stick to 2. As far as options, if it's really light trail use, you don't have a lot of load to worry about. iBox Stage 2 is a good option. If you see yourself getting into some more serious wheeling or have some load planned in the future, go 6112s and 5160s. But again, you guys, for these more specific recommendations, reach out to the team directly. And before anybody asks again, what do we say? No 3 inches on Tacomas, or 2016 to 2021 or 23 Tacomas, 3rd gens. 420 motor says, chewing and ramping the lugs. So that's a lack of. So what's basically probably happening right now, 420 Motors was having an issue with tire wear, put on big tires. And this is a big thing to talk about for this, because in our testing, we only tested tire clearance on these Tundras with 2.5-inch body or 2.6-inch body struts, because we know anything smaller, anything with a 2-inch piston or smaller, is going to struggle to manage that unsprung mass. What ends up happening is you have to imagine your suspension has to, when you hit a bump, it has to catch all that unsprung mass of the tire, brake hub assembly and everything, decelerate it, and then re-accelerate it to the ground and keep it planted. What ends up happening is if you don't have enough dampening force or you don't have enough spring rate, in this case, we wouldn't want to go with stiffer springs because it ride like garbage. In the absence of adequate support in the suspension, you'll hit a bump, the tire unloads, hits the ground again, and then bounces, and then you start getting a dribbling effect. And every time the tire leaves the ground and lands on it again, the speed of the tire changes. So every time that's happening, it's like you're briefly locking up the brakes for a second, and it ends up eating up every other lug. I've done it on a set of 37s with iBox 2.0s because that was just too much coil or too much tire for that coilover. TikTok got more?
33s, Fox 2.0s on a Tacoma. Do you need UCAs?
Most likely you are going to need the upper control arm, not for anything other than the tire clearance, because it'll allow you to run more positive caster. You'll be able to push the front tires further forward. So I would recommend doing that as opposed to having to do a cab mount chop and cutting your fenders and doing everything else. So you don't necessarily need it, but it will save you a lot of trimming. That's a giant pain in the butt to do.
Any preferences for which ones?
So the last redesign of SBCs are actually good. They made some real stinkers, but the last redesign is really good. Those have adjustability, really helps. Otherwise, Icon is another really strong option that's a little higher caster, has a lot of clearance, uses the best ball joint solution on the market, and we've ran tons of sets without issues.
Follow up from Andrew: if you were to do the 2-inch lift and not 3, can I fit 33s without trimming?
Yeah. And so part of the thing about it is as you go taller, you actually lose tire clearance after 1.5 inches of lift, 1.5 inches, 2 inches of lift. So you will have a better chance of clearing the 33s without rubbing on the cab mount and the tubs and the fenders and everything else behind the front tires, actually with less lift, because you'll be able to run a higher caster value or functionally be able to push the front tires further forward, which you need to do. Do you think Bilstein will make a 6100 for F-150 to complement the 5160s? I don't know. They can fit it, and they've become, everyone with the Tundras is really, really, really liking them, and everyone's been asking for them. I think if they get enough ash, they'll make them. As of right now, they have the 8100 smooth body. So if you wanted a 2.6 in the back, you could get it. It just would have a reservoir that you didn't have in the front. I'm going to check on Instagram real quick. All right, so Instagram's caught up. We got more on TikTok.
He follows up again. How much would you recommend to spend on a lift kit since it's his first one?
Ooh, that's a good question. $1,000 to $2,000 is a sweet spot. Anytime you spend, there are a lot of basic things that work decent, like Bilstein 5100s, Eibach Pro Truck Sports, even the lesser OMEs like the Nitro Charger Sports. I would say 75% of our customers who are enthusiasts and even just regular dudes just daily driving buy those entry-level kits, and they end up at least upgrading the front within the first 2 years. So although it's cheaper to go with the cheaper stuff, it's not really cheaper in the long term. And we usually find those more intermediate level options. So we'll say those 6112s up to like an Icon Stage 2 kit or 3 or whatever are things people can at least live with for a couple of years, live with long term or long enough to justify their investment and not feel like they just threw $500 to $1,000 away. So you kind of want to be looking at that middle of the road stuff that, coilovers and shocks, you're looking at 1,000 to 1,500, and then you add on control arms, you're at, 1,800 to 2,500, so like I would say maybe 1,000 to 2,500, depending on the additional components you get. If you're doing it in stages, then just coilovers and shocks. We're not counting arms, we're not counting leaf springs, just the bare minimum to begin with. You're looking at 1,000 to 1,500 is probably the sweet spot.
Yeah, a little bit of buy once, cry once, and a little bit of you probably don't need some race suspension, but also you might be underwhelmed by the entry level.
Yeah, the entry level stuff, and you still want to give yourself headroom. And at that middle of the road stuff, not only is it going to give you enough performance to go anywhere you want to go, if you spent more money, the only thing you're going to get is to be able to go there faster or in more comfort. It also means, even if you upgrade in the future, this is going to be something that you could live with for 3, 5, 6 years before you actually go hog wild.
Yeah. So even if you kind of desired something more, they're not so under what you're looking for to where you're itching to replace them right away.
Yeah, exactly. And Leon asked, what's your list of out-of-the-box softest to stiffest brands? King, Fox, Eibach, Dobinson, Icon, then Bilstein. That's about it, but it does vary a lot based on on the part line and the application. So, there's a lot of older Icon applications that are definitely stiffer riding than the Bilsteins. And just for everybody else on every other platform, his ranking was King, from softest to stiffest. It was King, then Fox, then Eibach, then Dobinson, then Icon, then Bilstein. And for most applications on comparable shocks, this is largely true. There are just some applications where the Icons are definitely stiffer than the Bilsteins. Older Icon kits are definitely stiffer than most of the Bilstein stuff. And there are some older Fox, like Factory Race Series kits that are supposed to be discontinued, but somehow we keep getting inventory of, that are the stiffest things on earth. There are also some select King kits, like the adjustable King 2.5s for 4th gen Tacomas were actually surprisingly firm, and were firmer than the Foxes I felt on those. So, but most of the time, King Softest, then Fox, then Ibach, then Dobinson, then Icon, then Bilstein usually tracks. And I should also say there are some times where the Dobinsons are by far and away the softest if you get an MRR and back them all the way off. So there are some places where they kind of, the list shakes up, but usually that's how it goes, and that's why it's kind of important to talk to us. Like, you can kind of go based on that, but it does very much matter on application and when the particular model line you are looking at was originally designed. Because both Icon and Fox have backed off their valving on a lot of their newer stuff, and they're nowhere near as stiff as where they used to be. And there's some really old stuff that is just like, brother, if you ain't going mock Jesus, you're going to be chasing fillings out of your face. How's TikTok doing?
Brandon follows up. Are adjustable UCAs easy to adjust? I don't want them to be a headache or to have a chance of error.
It depends on the adjustment range. Now, so if installed correctly, there's going to be zero chance of them probably loosening up. And if you understand how alignment and suspension geometry work, making those adjustments is pretty easy. I would just say, one, you want to make sure if you're having somebody install it and align it are familiar with it. And you just read the instructions. And most of the time, it's super easy to actually get them installed. Having somebody who's comfortable with aligning it sometimes is a different story. Things like the SVC is super straightforward. You clock the ball joint to one of the 8 or 12 positions they tell you, slide the camber, slide in and out, you're meant. Things that are like billet arms that have the threaded bosses for Heims on the frame side can be a little harder for an alignment shop to get set up, but if they understand what they're doing when they're aligning your vehicle, they will understand how to adjust those arms. If they get the theory, which anybody who is touching your truck should understand the theory, then they're not going to have any problems. What is the best way to lift the rear on a second-gen Tacoma? Change your leaf springs, stock Toyota leaf springs. I don't care what Toyota it is. They're all hot garbage. Toyota's never been able to make leaf springs. A leaf spring upgrade is one of the best things you can do. Now, if you can't really afford to spend $800 to $1,000 on a set of leaf springs, totally get it. Icon sells, and Deaver, but Icon's the better value, has 3-leaf progressive out-of-leaf packs that replace your factory overload and give you a little bit more progressive support at the end of the stroke. So you get them 1.5 inches of lift. It'll breathe some more life back into your leaf pack, at least for a year or two, and definitely improves ride performance, and even a little load handling to a certain degree once it started to sag. With it being a second-gen Tacoma, though, brother, you were probably due for leaf springs 5 years ago. So probably just should get a leaf pack. And on Tacomas, they really don't like blocks. Not only do you lose travel, to some degree, they seem to flatten out the leaf packs faster. And flattening out the leaf pack is a real problem on those because they don't start off with a whole lot of arc. Do the Bilstein 5160 shock absorbers come with a little oil in the reservoir because of it? Is it said that the 5100s are almost the same? Yeah. So monotube shocks like the 5100s and 5160s are gas charge, and what divides the gas charge is an internal floating piston. And there is a portion of the shock body on a non-reservoir shock like the 5100 that houses that gas charge. So there's a little bit of real estate that the shock can't use in the body. The reservoir shocks means that whole shock body is filled with oil, and the nitrogen charge and internal floating piston is now in the reservoir, which now dissipates heat and usually gives you a little bit more usable travel because you can have the same extended length or an even longer extended length with the same compressed length. We see this on F-150s. The standard 5100s, I think, have 10 or 11 inches of travel. 5160s have straight up 12. So it does make a difference there, but functionally, most of the time, tuning is the same. So for most people, what you're going to notice is that the 5160 is more consistent. So when you're driving it off-road hard enough to get the shock hot and introduce fade, the 5160 will spend more time feeling normal before it bleeds off and starts to go to pieces. Now, and it's almost that extra travel goes hand in hand. If, you know, you need the extra cooling off-road, you could probably benefit from that little bit of extra travel. If you need that little bit of extra travel, a little bit of extra heat dissipation ain't a bad thing. But for most people, if you're not really going off-road at all, you're not spending really any time off-road, you know, there's no reason to go to the 5160. How important is it to have matched springs and shocks? What drawbacks can one see if it's a stiff spring but soft shocks, soft springs, stiff shocks? So, Leon, this is a great question because this is like the story of car coilovers for like leading up to like 2013. Everything was undersprung and overdamped or underdamped and oversprung. So, if something is tuned too soft, particularly on rebound, and has too stiff of a spring, one, it's going to be uncontrolled on its rebound characteristics, and particularly on bolt-on shock setups where travel is limited, you're going to notice a lot more harsh top out. A good example of this is we tested 6112s on Jeff's Tundra and iBox Stage 2 2.0 coilovers. They're both about the same length, but the 6112s have a much bigger piston. They have more damping force potential and are also tuned stiffer. We ultimately had, by the time we pulled the iBox 2.5s off, we were at barely 2 inches of lift. We're at 2.25 with the 6112s, and the 6112s topped out less and felt more composed on rebound because they had the damping force to control the spring. If you ever see somebody, and even if you're not topping out all the time, the titty shake, you know, if you ever have been in like somebody with eBay coilovers and you're going down the highway and your titties are just shaking, that's oversprung, underdamped. Now, if something is overdamped and undersprung, a lot of times, one, on compression, if it's too stiff on compression relative to spring rate, it's going to ride like garbage and still handle like garbage. So the springs are doing a lot to reduce body roll, brake dive, squat under throttle, all those unwanted body motions. And even, you know, obviously a stiffer spring's better under load. So you'll find in those events where, like, let's say you need to turn into a corner, it's still going to have a ton of body roll. And when you hit a bump and it's on compression, the suspension is still not going to compress enough to manage the bump. So on compression, you're hurting for traction and you're killing yourself on unwanted body motions. On rebound, what'll happen if you don't have enough spring rate for the amount of rebound force that you have, or the rebound damping force that you have, the tires will be prone to unloading and will also just be kind of harsh because the suspension will be packing. So you'll hit a bump and it won't extend it won't extend fast enough to keep the tire on the ground. And that starts to make it feel really wooden. This is actually one of the many reasons I think why a lot of brands haven't been super stoked on putting rebound adjusters on vehicles, because they can be very sensitive to making rebound changes without changing spring rate. And can do a lot for not only ride quality and overall bump performance, but also comfort. So it is very important to match those together. Now, I will say the greater the damping force potential, let's say, of a shock. So the bigger the piston, you know, the bigger the shock body, the more flexibility you will have in being able to change spring rate before you are absolutely forced to revalve it. You know, like if I had a set of Fox 2.0 coilovers and I went from a 550 to 700 pound spring, it would be probably undrivable. But if I went to a 550 to a 700 on like a Fox 2.5, it'd still need a retune, but I could at least drive it without wanting to kill myself, you know, in the interim.
So, good question. Is suspension performance different from vehicle to vehicle? I mean, assuming it means like one package.
Yeah. So if you were to test, let's say Bilstein 6112s on 6 different vehicles, all 6 of those different vehicles will be different, but at least the delta, so the change from stock, will probably be similar. So like you can expect, let's say, you know, you might see a little bit firmer ride over smaller bumps at lower speed, but more support. less body roll, and more consistency. You can kind of, the delta, the amount of change, the way it's going to change is probably going to be the same on all applications, because most brands with a particular model line are tuning them and designing them with a certain ethos, with a certain driver in mind, with a certain use case in mind. So optimizing most vehicles to perform in a certain way in terms of tuning is going to require is going to end up in a similar change. You're going to do a similar amount of things to alter things to where you want, but that doesn't necessarily mean all things are going to perform the same. Like 6112s on the F-150 didn't work as well as the 6112s on the Tundra in terms of high-speed performance, but the 6112s on the F-150 were better at lower speeds. But the difference from stock was very much the same. And the differences between the two, honestly, were the same stock. The Tundra was a little better at speed. The F-150 was better at articulating low speed and that kind of stuff. And so, the differences you see between using the same shocks in different vehicles are going to largely be the same in terms of changes from stock, and the differences that you feel between the different vehicles are going to be the same differences you probably felt when they were all stock.
Yeah, so it's like a similar modification, but the vehicles are not going to suddenly act like each other. But the baseline change from stock will be a similar
be a little difference. Kato869 asks on Instagram, what do you think of the STI top hats? I think that's the best way to lift the front of your Raptor without changing to a different coilover. That combination of using, a small spacer that extends, that is functionally a top hat spacer and a preload spacer. One keeps you closer to being in the ideal ride zone of the struts and isn't so much spacer that you might be introducing bind. So I think they're the way to go. And they're also stronger, which is a real problem with all Raptors, is top hat strength. They functionally, in terms of the bushings used to retain the stud on the strut, and a lot of that hardware is the same as a regular F-150. So although the studs that go to the chassis are thicker and longer and whatever, the part of the top hat that fails, the bushing that retains the strut, is prone to failing and would be less prone with an STI. So definitely a good idea, and something we regularly do with our same-day services and rebuilds, because we're not going to charge you any extra to install it. We had to take the stock top hats off. We're going to have to put a top hat back on it, so we're not going to charge you any more in terms of labor for that. So STI top hats are a great solution if you're going to keep the stock Raptor stuff. And the stock Raptor stuff is one of the few things that have enough travel to where extending it further, they have the ability where you can get away with that little bit of lift. George on Instagram is asking, do you rebuild shocks? Yes, we sure do. We rebuild them here in Baldwin Park or Irwindale, California. You can also get set up with a same-day service where we schedule you in. You drive in, we rebuild your shocks, you drive out at the end of the day, so there's no real downtime, or just a day of downtime. If that's something you're interested in, go on our website, and we have a service page. You can fill out a form. We'll get you dialed in. So definitely we can do that. We're actually Icon's number one, or their choice service center in the region. So we got you there. We can even handle some of their warranties if need be. Stephen K, if I'm going from stock Tundra SR5 suspension to my first upgrade suspension, would you say stay close to stock height? I want to feel like I have extra travel but not lose drivability. It depends on the coilover and strut package, or the coilover and shock package you go with. I usually generally lean towards less lift is more, but that is going to be a long truck. So if you're going off-road, having that little bit of extra height for the breakover is really going to be nice. If you're looking for something more basic that retains the stock upper control arms, I think the sweet spot is probably only 1.5 inches of lift in the front before you start to see that a loss in down travel over stock. If you're looking for something like extended travel, Fox or King, 2.5 in the front is probably fine. And then if you're looking at Icons or Dobinsons, you could probably go up to 3, but I think probably 2.5 is going to be the sweet spot in the front, and then matching it in the back. But ultimately, where you land depends on use case and kind of goals. If you want to drive fast, you might want to be taller so you have more upward suspension travel. If you're focusing on articulation, you might want to be lower so you can have more droop. And mostly this is talking about in the rear, in the front. In the rear, as long as you do like a 1-inch spring, you can run all of the longer travel shock options that are available, 1 or 2-inch spring. How's TikTok doing?
Leroy says, thanks for the tip a couple weeks back. Ended up getting Kings for Pop's truck. Sweet.
Nice.
Glad you like them, or hope he does. Thoughts on the Icon Stage 2 billet kit for a Ram 1500?
That's probably 2019 plus, because I don't think they have the billets for the older trucks. I'm cheating, boys. I'm going on Icon's website because I don't remember what's included with Stage 2. I remember a lot of things, but what Icon does with their individual Stage 2 kits, kind of hard to remember. So that's their Stage 2. I'm going to be honest with you. The Stage 2 billet kit is $670 more money. Oh, wait, no, let me look at Stage 2 billet versus tubular. Okay, so billet, or tubular is almost $800 more than the tubular. Billet is more than the tubular. For $3,600, you could go Stage 3 and get 2.5s in the rear, which are going to perform a lot better and get you a lot more for your money, probably than those billet arms would. The billet arms give you adjustability, which isn't really necessary on the Rams. It doesn't really help all that much with tire clearance. They don't have a caster 4.5 with you. But they also get you Heims on that side, which are going to be more maintenance, have a shorter service life, but be a lot stronger. Ultimately, you will rip the pivots off of your truck before the tubular arms even give up. So going to billet, really, they look cool. They give you adjustment that you would never need, but I think you would get way more performance benefit for your money going to Stage 3 using the tubular arms instead of running a Stage 2 billet. I mean, it's 2.5-inch body with a reservoir versus a 2-inch body without one, and the geometry of the arms is the same.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're pinching pennies, more shock and just as adequate UCA.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that technically the billet arm is a better control arm. The areas in which they are better probably aren't going to be all that applicable for you and that specific truck. Now, that's not to say the billet arms don't have their value. If you have like a Toyota, that extra adjustment really helps. If you have a Bronco, you've got a lot of other applications that helps. What's your favorite vehicles, platforms, Ford, Toyota or Ford? I'm a Ford guy. But most of the guys here, me and Esteban are Ford guys. I only like Toyotas if you put a Honda engine in them. Otherwise, I like to be able to fit tires and not break things. So I like Fords. But most of the guys here are Toyota guys. Now, in terms of suspension, finding parts, doing things, there are definitely more products available for Toyota. So you are going to see a lot more Toyota stuff on our feet because there are more modern applications available that are sold in higher numbers and have more available products. But
yeah, being popular is good when that
in that case. But like, if you ask me to go to the dealership, if I'm going to spend $60,000 on a TRD Pro 4Runner, when I could spend like a little bit more and have 37s lockers and 15 inches of travel with a Bronco Raptor, or I can get a Ranger Raptor for $10,000 less than like a TRD off-road, you're tripping. And the previous generations, you're cutting them apart to fit anything over than a 33. The steering can't even turn more than a 33. And their throttle mapping is the worst. Their throttle and brake mapping are the worst things I've ever driven in my entire life. Sorry, Toyota guys, but like the brakes feel like they do all of their braking in the first inch, and then after that, there's no brakes.
If you breathe on them.
Yeah, and then our boy Brandon behind the camera is King Nissan. Datsun Daddy.
Yeah.
actually, he's whatever like works.
Yeah, I'm just practical. Yeah.
Yeah.
So honestly, if I
Yeah,
if
I'm
it
also
came down to it and I wasn't in what I was in now, I'd be leaning pretty heavy towards the Bronco because it's kind of my stupid thing, but I've never owned an automatic and I don't really want to start now. And that's,
yeah, and you don't want to be stuck in the little motor. I don't, yeah, like if I had to go to a new car dealership now, if you asked me to, if I'm me and I want to go fast, I'm probably going to the Ford dealership. If I'm me and I want to go rock crawling, I'm going to the Jeep dealership.
Yeah.
I would rather have to fix the occasional wiring thing every 3 months on the way to work than have to change tie rods and axle shafts just because I have 37s.
Yeah, and I mean, no matter what platform you get, there's always some little thing that's not flawless.
Yeah.
Oftentimes there's a fix.
Yeah.
So it's not always the end of the world.
Yeah, and it's for your use case. What is that fix worth it?
And it depends on what you're doing and is it worth it? Yeah. So if it's cool for you with what you want to do and the fix it and send it.
Yeah, like if you wanted the most reliable thing on 33s, go get like a 3rd gen, 2nd gen Tacoma, 4th or 5th gen 4Runner. Sure. If you want to wheel hard and you don't want to have to spend twice the cost of the vehicle to be able to go hit the Rubicon without ripping every panel off of it, you might go to the Jeep or the Ford dealership.
Right.
Because reliability is a sliding scale. And if, I'm not going to say a Ford or a Jeep is anywhere near as reliable as a Toyota in stock form, but the Jeeps you see on the Rubicon, they're Jeeps that can make it down, and Broncos that can make it around the Rubicon that are going to be a lot stocker than that Toyota.
True.
Yeah.
Speaking of Fords, for a 2019 Ranger, just want a more comfortable ride. Can't decide between Bilstein and Fox. JR400 asks.
So if you're comparing Bilstein and Fox, you're probably comparing a Fox 2.0 and a Bilstein 6112. The Fox 2.0 is definitely more comfortable. That said, the Eibach Stage 2 kits ride about the same, handle better, and will last 2 times as long. If you get 30 or 40,000 miles out of a set of Fox 2.0s, God bless, brother, you got lucky. And so you're going to be rebuilding them a lot. The Eibach's Steve's on his Ranger, I think, have like 80,000 miles. And they're definitely softer than they used to be.
Right.
And
he gives it hell.
Yeah, that Ranger's been off the ground more times than I can count, and has also anytime it has been under load, it has never been under payload or under the towing capacity. Like he's towed like 12,000 pounds or something crazy with it.
He's pushing it.
Yeah, and so those shocks are just giving up now, and they have a limited lifetime warranty. So if you want the more comfortable ride, the Fox is going to be softer than the Bilstein, although not perform nearly as well under serious off-road abuse because they're only a 2-inch body in the front. But the Eibach is about as comfortable as the Fox, lasts longer. And so it's going to be the way to go. Now, if you want the performance that the Bilstein offers, at least up front, but you want more comfort, that's when you're going to need to look at a Fox or a King 2.5. What's your opinion on Jeep Comanches, brother? Comanches were almost my first car. I almost had a Comanche, and I saw it on eBay. I went to roll up. It was on 35s. It had ARB lockers in it, and the guy said it was on a Dana 44 and an 8.8. It was not. It was on a Dana 30 and a 35. But no, Comanches, I got a real love for those bad boys. They're sick. If you can get one with an AX15 and a 4.0, it's pretty bitchin'. I honestly, of that era, the Jeep 4.0 is the only 6-cylinder 4-wheel drive I would probably want to you could probably still live with every day. The Toyotas, the Fords, the Chevys, less so, but they're just so gutless that you couldn't drive it. And 4.0s run forever. Just chassis stiffeners and let it eat. Leon asks, are there mods to throw on 2+ shocks per corner of a vehicle? Is there even much of a benefit? Yeah. So as time goes on, we are doing the dual shock thing less and less because single shock, internal position sensitive stuff like the 8112s, ADS, MBRs, and stuff like that are able to do a lot with only one shock. But yeah, most long travel kits for independent suspension kit systems, and like even if you have a solid axle, there's a lot of like Carly and Evo kits for Ram and Super Duties and Jeeps respectively that have coilovers and bypasses. There's lots of situations. So like, if let's say you have a 2.5 inch body coilover and a 2.5 inch body bypass, there are, to get for most internal bypass setups, right, you would need like a 4.0 internal bypass or a 3.5 internal bypass to get the same level of performance, and you're not going to have external adjustments of those individual ride zones like an external bypass does. So there's not a lot of vehicles that are going to fit a 3.5 inch diameter body shock between the control arm or even between the tire. And so a lot of times now there is space when they're next to each other that you might be able to fabricate mounts have that clearance. The real benefit is, one, you have the damping force of two shocks, which means both do not need to be tuned to stiff to provide far more support. So you maintain good small bump compliance. You get better big bump support. You can get better handling without sacrificing as much like bump performance or comfort. And the bypass, having a bypass secondary with your coilover or regular smooth body shock, gives you external position sensitive adjustments. So if you have a 4-tube bypass, you can control 2 zones of compression, 2 zones of rebound for those ride zones. So you can really set up how each ride zone performs as you go through the travel, which is very beneficial. In fact, King used to make things called coil passes, which was a coilover that was like, a 10-inch travel coilover would be the length of a 20-inch travel coilover, although only having 10 inches of stroke, and you would have the spring on the bottom where the shaft is, and then bypass tubes at the top. And so everybody hated servicing those, but that was a shock that people would run on like mud trucks, monster trucks, stuff like that. So there is really the real benefit is to have more damping force and position sensitivity with external adjustment. And if you go to brands like Fox, you can get something with a dual speed compression adjuster on the coilover. So you can control overall through the whole curve, bump stiffness and roll stiffness somewhat independently, and then you can individually adjust each zone. So it does have its value. And especially if you just had a bypass and you had to make adjustments for different areas of where you're driving, you're just, and you just needed the shocks to be a little stiffer or a little softer. It's a nightmare to have to turn 4 clicks on 8 fucking knobs on each corner when you could just turn 3 clicks on your coilover knob and it's where it wants to be. I've just bought the Icon knuckles and UCAs. Do you think I could keep my 6112s and maybe add a spacer to get a little bit more height? Trying to get a little more height on the power boost. Yes, you will be able to do that if you're running the Icon Delta Joint Pro upper control arms. You probably will at least be able to get away with a 1/2 inch spacer. Beyond that, it starts to get a little funny. The one thing I would say is you exceed over that 1/2 inch, get the trimmer axle shafts. Ford Performance now sells them and they're not super bad. How do you put quick adjusters on King's external bypass shocks? That's a good question. Does King have quick adjusters? I think they do. Yeah, so they have quick adjusters. Yeah. So what would happen is you would have to buy the parts for the quick adjusters. So you have the knobs. We would disassemble your shocks, pull out the bypass valves and the existing adjusters, and they just plug into the existing place, which is the case with, a lot of shocks. We did that a few years back on a set of 8100s going to the quick adjust. I think we've done it on some Fox 3.0s for a first gen Raptor. It's not hard to do. Most of the time you just pull all the parts out of the tube, put the new parts in the tube, and that's a good time to do a rebuild at the same time. And definitely worth it. It's not like the cheapest thing, I don't think, but I think it's worth it because having to turn wrenches to adjust your shocks kind of sucks, especially when you're in the desert and it's hot and you can't reach your shocks easy.
Yeah. I've been there. So not only that, but yeah, so if you're already doing a rebuild is going to be the best time for that. Basically. Right?
Yeah. ESSJ Living. SJ, would you recommend the Marlin Crawler ICLT for the 5th-gen 400? I think it's one of the best long travel solutions out there. All Pro has one that looks pretty good. Their modular long travel is probably worth a look. I'd have to look at pricing to see if it's better, but it's a very complete solution, especially with the Mar rack. I think another option that honestly might be the better compromise overall, JD Fab long travel with their lower pivot mounts, because one of the real benefits of the RCLT is that it pushes the front tires so far forward, but you don't really have a ton of adjustment on that position. They give you a bunch of different misalignment spacers with those JD Fab lower pivots, and then you run their long travel and you can go in and out. We're running it with a combo of a old Depot racing kit on Jeff's Tacoma, and that's been a really solid option. The Depot racing long travel is dog shit. Don't run it, but it was cheap and we've been able to make it work. So yeah, RCLT is good. Might consider the JD Fab, and then their rack solution I think might be the superior rack solution. There's slide rack, so they add on a slide on the other side in front of the rack to support it so it doesn't tweak and break, and can also be modified to take a hydro assist, so you can get the extra steering assistance if you need it. They also sell I think they sell a power steering pump, power steering pump upgrade for it as well. And so that gives you probably more strength than like the Mar rack or a Tundra rack, but it still utilizes your stock rack that hasn't been externally modified. You just kind of bolt it into the existing setup. So if you have a rack failure, if you were to have a rack failure with a Mar rack, they've machined down the ends, so you couldn't just go to the parts store and get a 200 series rack. And if you did a Tundra rack, it's the same thing. Whereas a JD Fab rack, you're still using your existing factory steering rack, but you're supporting it additionally. So if you do have a failure, go down to AutoZone, O'Reilly's, whatever, and Napa, and you can get yourself a replacement.
Kevin Lopez asks, Ram 1500 5th gen 4x4. Can you combine Bilstein 6112 with rear King shocks?
I wouldn't. It is just probably, I mean, if you were going to get Kings in the front in the future or go to 8112s all around, in the back, I just wouldn't. The linear valving of the King versus the digressive valving of the Bilstein's going to make it really diabolical in the handling department. I've driven with like a mismatch of a linear and a digressive shock on trucks that weren't kind of optimized to work together, and it on a low grip scenario, they can get pretty diabolical. I think 50 Rams have the option for 8100. So if you just wanted a 2.5 in the back, just keep it all Bilstein or just keep it all King. Jack F96 asks, would you be able to put E-clicks on bypass shocks? No. So how the E-clicks work is they're controlling oil flow into the main reservoir. And since oil is bypassing the main piston, and a lot of times working around behind it, flow into the reservoir isn't great. Fox has done live valve bypass, but their control valves are on each bypass tube, which the SDI setup isn't set up to do. Bro, can I run 3-inch shock in the front on leveling kit and aftermarket oil control arm? I like the little squat look. One, go get help. Don't squat your truck. Go seek help from somebody, a therapist, a father figure, somebody who can instruct you how to make better decisions. And if it's a coilover or shock or something designed for 3 inches of lift you have with the arm, you could do it. Your ride will be worse with the front taller than the rear. Vehicles are taller than the rear for a reason. One, unloading the front is going to make it more prone to topping out, harsher on rebound. Two, most vehicles are independent suspension in the front, solid axle in the rear, which means you have more bump travel available in the front than the rear. When you've lifted the front all that much and not the rear, it's just going to want to buck the rear end if you hit anything hard. So lift the rear. Be a man. Rake.
Rake is not bad. 5100s or 5160 for that same Ram, he says.
Well, if you were considering Kings in the back, you probably a 5160 is going to be your bare minimum.
Right.
Yeah. If you're considering a 2.5 in the back, a 2.0 with a reservoir is probably going to be your minimum.
Yep.
Do I save for adjustable Kings or just run 5100 and 6112 on my Tacoma? Well, so don't waste your time on 5100s in the front. I think on cases like these, it's important to determine what your end goal of the build is. Are you going to be running a true serious long travel kit in the future? Maybe. Then maybe you want to go with those 6112s in the front, maybe a 5100 or 5160 in the back, and just to get you something that will work for as long as you can make it work until you can run that good setup. You wouldn't really want to buy a set of Kings if you're going to run like a +3.5 long travel kit in the future, because it's just money in the toilet. So it kind of depends on what your end goal. And really, if your end goal is to be mid-travel with Kings, upper control arms, a good leaf pack, the set of Kings, that's your end goal. Just save up and do that now. Spending money twice is never worth anybody's money, and you're going to lose money even if you sell the 6112s on the used market. I have a 6-inch lift BDS on my Ram 1500. What coilovers should I use for overlanding? It depends on the year of Ram, but it's going to be probably a Fox or a King coilover. Ultimately, if you are serious about your off-road driving, you care about your off-road driving, I hate to say it, but drop bracket kits are probably the last thing you would want on your truck. So unless it's netting you the ability to run a 40-inch tire, might want to trade that truck in and get one that didn't have a drop bracket lift put on it, because it's kind of hard to go back. They cut the cross member. Yeah, it's just a daily Overlander Billy bars with a small rooftop tent. So yeah, I mean, honestly, the Bilsteins will do more than you want. If you're a real stickler for comfort, like you want something to ride really, really, really nice for your money, it might be worth your money to go for Kings, but I would probably go for like an Old Man Emu BP51, which is less money than a King setup, an internal bypass, and better for that kind of Overlander type setup. Otherwise, the 6112 will more than do it. What you'd be sacrificing is small bump compliance, particularly at lower speeds, for your use case. So like, still going to be a lot better than stock, but if comfort is a really big priority, then it might be worth it to spend that little bit of extra money. I just might lean towards like an old BP51 over a King, because they're a little better optimized for how you're using it.
Johnny says, got a 2015 Tacoma. I do mild off-roading and mainly street driving. Our 5100 is my best bet for budget.
They're probably your best budget option, but just be real with yourself that you're going to be calling us in a year or two to upgrade the fronts at the very least. So it's not long-term. It's not going to be probably the best budget solution, because you're probably going to upgrade just to get something more comfortable. Because I think you'll be disappointed that you spent $500 and it's probably not all that much more comfortable than stock on the street. But yeah, that's probably your best bet. Just keep in the back of your mind, if you are a real stickler for comfort, or you see yourself wheeling harder in the future, is this a vehicle you're going to be keeping for the next 10 years? You might want to consider moving a little up market, maybe IBOC stage 2.
Speaking of which, Sonny says we need IBOC to drop the Pro Truck 2.5s ASAP.
Yeah, so I'll spoil it a little bit. It's alive. It doesn't count. IBOC was going to release the F-150 parts like now or by the end of this month. They've moved everything to release in November at a SEMA. And they're going to be adding on, I want to say 250 series Land Cruiser and one other app. I think the new Tacomas. So we did get a delay on the F-150 parts, but we're going to see all of them released in November-ish for SEMA. And there'll be at least 3 applications. We hear there might be color choices, which is pretty cool.
Jake was asking about, I have BP51s once a couple years. Oh, I see. Once a couple years go by, I'll switch to 8112 DSA Plus. I guess he was asking. What else did he say? BP51 with Delta UCAs for now, and heavy leafs don't guys recommend upgrade braking system.
Huh?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure what you're asking there, buddy, but we're
shock surplus, not brake surplus. But definitely, did you say it was a Tacoma? The brakes are garbage. upgrade them. If you're, and that's something I would say, even a good set of pads and rotors, if you increase tire size or drive your vehicle hard at all, is worth every single penny. It's one of the best upgrades I've ever done on every vehicle I've ever had, and a lot of times it ends up saving you money, especially on stuff like that that'll just warp rotors if you look at it funny.
If you have BP 51s or and especially the 8112s, I mean you can drive faster, and if you're driving faster, you need to be able to stop.
You need more brakes. Yeah, and if you guys watched our 8112 review for the Bronco, I chickened out because I was coming up hot on a bunch of would-be Rangers someday, their scouts or whatever, their trainees, at like 65 miles an hour, and I had to stop that thing on dirt while in the whoops. And I was thinking, it would be nice to have a little bit more brake here. So, yeah, it's definitely worth it. When you're looking at those really high-end suspension options, you start to get to the point where the suspension starts outperforming the rest of the vehicle, whether that be braking or traction or the strength of the components. I think you could drive, if you set 8112s up right and drove it to their absolute limit, you would break things on.
That's that's no longer the weak point. So something else is.
Yeah.
Somewhere. Sonny follows up. Do you believe Eibach will make them for the GM truck application?
They probably will. Yeah. I think they're going to, all of their most popular applications, they're going to make them for. So 05 to current Tacomas, 2014 plus GM half ton, all the Toyotas pretty much, probably GM, probably F-150, obviously F-150, Bronco, probably Ranger. They're very popular with Rangers. So I would say you're guaranteed for the top 15 most popular, or at least top 10 most popular applications should probably see Eibach 2.5s within the next 1 to 2 years.
Jake clarifies he means how much better is 8112 than BP51 for overland aspects.
They comfort wise, they're not too far off. The real thing is the 8112s in the front really have so much more down travel than the BP51s. The BP51s are pretty prone to topping out. And the 2-inch piston also means you really need to keep speeds down more than you would think you would on them. The 8112s maybe not have much more small bump compliance, but they'll top out harshly a whole lot less and have a lot more big bump support. So you'll be able to where, let's say, on the BP51s, you're stuck at 10 miles an hour. You might be able to go 20, where on an obstacle, you might be lifting the tire every single time. On the BP51s, you may be still lifting the tire, but you won't be teetering with the Bilsteins. So they do make a pretty big difference, more so, I think, than the price point would entail. Spinny Stacy, I have a stock Tacoma. I want either Total Chaos Up or Dirt King, or should I go with Camberg? If you're looking at non-adjustable arms, the Icons are the best. The Delta joint is, I say arguably, but is the best ball joint solution on the market. It's a metal joint with a brass race. It's fully sealed and greasable, so it lasts and it's quiet like a factory ball joint, but is as strong as a uniball, the same size, and has the second most articulation at the ball joint of any other arm, and they're a really good deal. So the Cambergs are good. The Cambergs are very good. I think Total Chaos probably needs to do some redesigning on the arms. They're still using 1-inch uniballs. They're still, they're not the most positive on caster. There's some things that they could do better. So the Cambergs are good. Gotta say, Icons are better. Why don't we wrap things up here? What's max setting? You should run FJ Cruiser 6112s and 5160 with OEM control arms. I wouldn't go much over 2.5 inches of lift. It depends on the FJ year what that setting actually is, but probably 2.5 is about as high as I would go. It used to be 2 3/4. A lot of people could get away with it. As these FJs age and have needed to get a lot of alignments because things are wearing out, we find a lot of people have issues getting things back within spec, even over the 2.5-inch mark. So 2.5 in the front is as high as I would go. With the stock arms, if you're worried about tire clearance, ultimately the less lift, the better, because you can run more positive caster and push the front tires forward. On a 6112, they're going to bottom out at the same place as stock. So unless you're limiting travel, being taller isn't going to really help you for tire clearance. It's more about on the Toyota's wheel position, getting that front tire further forward. All right. TikTok got one last one.
One last one. Jake, Jake says if you had to rate in order from best to worst, that's basically super subjective and depends. Based on what we've already talked about, even that, it just going to depend on what you're trying to do with it.
Yeah.
OME, IBOC Kingdom. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation. We got to go, but it's going to depend on your use case, how you use the truck. So for the last one, Ali says, is Dobinson's IMS good for Chevy Trail Boss?
Dobinson's IMS, let me double check on the lift height and the lengths. The real thing about the Trail Boss is because they have 2 inches of lift from the factory. A lot of the options that were optimized for the regular ones end up being really like towards the end of their travel, and which forces them to be a little harsh, even when you get to stock Trail Boss heights by comparison. IMS is optimized around 2 inches of lift. I'm not really sure I would run that on a Trail Boss. It would be good at stock height, but there are options like these 6112s that are longer in travel and ultimately probably would perform and ride better because they are optimized specifically for the Trail Boss. Now, if you're starting to look at the MRRs up front, those are longer in travel, good for up to 3 inches of lift. It might be better at stock Trail Boss height. But in terms of Trail Boss stuff, the best options are Fox, their Trail Boss Specific or Extended Travel 2.5s, King Trail Boss Specific or Extended Travel 2.5s and 3.0s. 3.0s for the Fox as well, and the Bilsteins are long. Their Trail Boss Specific parts on all those cases, or their Extended Travel parts, are longer and long enough to maintain a decent ride at Trail Boss height or even an inch above.
Sounds good. And yet, our pleasure, Jake, asking about durability. Go on our YouTube and check out one of our most recent videos. It's about durability and longevity. That will answer all your questions about that.
Yep. And let me do one last check on YouTube. All right, guys. Well, that's going to be it. Tomorrow, the video on fitting the 35s on that dear Tundra is going live. So make sure you stay tuned. Should be dropping right at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Until then, y'all rock on.
Thanks for your questions, guys. See you next time.